Welcome to another episode on the challenges and triumphs of online teaching during this pandemic at the Female Educators Roundtable with your host, Debby Enoe, and another of my guests from around the world. Jennifer, would you please introduce yourself? Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome.
Debbie, hi. My name is Jennifer G. Robinson, and I qualified and have been teaching since 2002. I teach primarily film and media studies, and I teach primarily Key Stage 4 and 5, but I have done and certainly will be going back to some Key Stage 3.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us what age group is Key Stage 3?
So Key Stage 3 is like year 7, from year 7 and 8 and 9. Key Stage 4 is Key Stage, years 10 and 11, and Key Stage 5 is years 12 and 13.
Okay, so that's age group is secondary school from.
Yeah, so I teach secondary school.
Okay,
yeah.
Fine, thank you. Because not every country they understand the key stages because they're in age group. Thank you, and thank you for accepting the offer to come on the platform to discuss some of the challenges that you've had teaching the students on the online platform. You also say to me that you actually taught in the physical classroom.
Yes.
So can you share with us what some of the issues were in relationship to you teaching in the physical classroom, but with restriction, and then you teaching on the online platform?
Right, so I was involved with a lot of other teachers across the country, speaking in the UK. Not only were we teaching online, but we were also designated key worker support for key worker children. So those people who are on the front line, doctors, nurses, and various other people designated in that key worker status, we were to support their children. So their children were coming to our schools. So I was going on to support those children in a timetable, which wasn't as what they were used to. It was all new for all of us. So I was supporting them as well as teaching my own classes and my own students online. Okay, so yeah.
So what was that like? How did it feel? What was the emotion in terms of we've been told that, okay, we need to have this physical distance, we have to be aware and things like that, but yet still you were in the physical classroom teaching these children. What was it like? What was the distance? Tell us about it again.
Okay, so I think that people are quite rightly worried and anxious and challenged in primary and by primary. There is this idea that somehow there aren't going to be any challenges when we come to secondary, but that's not been my experience when we come to secondary. No, you're not going to have possibly children or young people slobbering all over you as you might do in, say, years 1 and 2. But definitely what I experienced was that once children became familiar with the routine, that in itself paradoxically meant that they were somewhat relaxed in their social distancing, or their sharing of tools that they were using, or forgetting to cleaning down their stations. So it's this repetitive laying down of the laws and the rules to them in that physical environment to remember a means of keeping themselves and me as a teacher safe. And you have to bear in mind that was not the full cohort of the school. So when we go back in September, we're going to have this challenge expanded exponentially. So yeah.
Thank you. So what was it, now we move into the virtual classroom, what was it like teaching on the virtual classroom, teaching in the virtual classroom, and what's the difference? I've asked you two
So,
questions. Let's do one.
yeah. So, there were safeguarding issues, and a lot of schools took this on board in terms of us teaching online. And with those safeguarding issues, it meant that we could not see students and they could not see us. In some instances, and most instances, certainly for me, we could not hear them and they could not hear me. So it was quite a sterile environment, teaching online, because of those challenges and because of the safeguarding things that we have to do and we have to take into consideration when we were teaching online. So it is very different to teaching physically and teaching and seeing and involving and engaging with your students in the physical environment. Is two totally different things. When you can see them, you can measure their interaction, you can see whether or not they're engaged, you can see whether or not they understand what you're trying to deliver, you can see whether or not they're misbehaving, and so on and so forth. So there's no doubt about it. You can't beat the classroom environment in terms of being in front of your students, being in front of your children and delivering your lessons. Because of course there's also, there might be group work or pair work that you might want to do with them. Of course, that in itself is going to present a lot of problems and challenges and rethinking about how you deliver your learning when we go back formally in September. So from my background, I come from a film and media background. So a lot of the technology is secondhand to me. A lot of the technology is second nature to me. A lot of the way in which we deliver what I had to deliver was orthodox back for me. What is challenging is trying to rehash and redo the content of your learning. So we were speaking before, so much of what we already had as resources, we had to redo them. I had to redo them because, you know, it's going to be very different delivering my resources in classes in the physical environment as opposed to online and in a digital way. And many of us weren't taught to do that. Many of us had to learn how to do that on the hop. And so that was, it was more that we didn't have enough time, and nobody could have given us enough time. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that was the challenge. Yeah, that was the challenge, the time scale, the time frame in having to do this. And I think that given those restrictions, we did very well. Did very well.
Yep, I totally agree with you. We've done fantastically well,
Yeah.
in the sense that we want to train with that because we've all been trained in the physical classroom, and we had to be educators to ourselves very quickly.
Yeah.
And YouTube must have had such a high, demand, because YouTube was my tutorial. Because I needed to know how to negotiate the platform, how to share the screen and all of that. We had to actually do some crash courses.
Absolutely, we did. And I think that, I take my hat off, but then I would say that.
No, but we're being honest. We know from where we came from to where we are now as educators, because all industry have had a shift in relationship to technology, except education. But education, we have been forced to make a shift. And we had no warning, we had no training. It's like we closed the schools Friday, Monday, we prepared to go online.
Absolutely.
And weekend, you just had to swat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with you. Having said all of those things, I don't think teaching online is something that, once we manage the virus and we get to any kind of normalcy, I don't think this is something that we should put to bed. I think that this should be part of our tools that we use to deliver to
Yes.
teach, as a matter of course.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to say goodbye to any of this at all.
Yeah, I totally and wholeheartedly agree with you, because after all, I've spent enough hours trying to train myself. So there's no way these new skills need to be forgotten, okay? Hell no.
Exactly.
Hell no. That's not on, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I think that education needed that shift. But it is sad that we had to teach ourselves and it was not enough wanting to do that. But as I said, every industry had a change in terms of the implementation of technology and using technology as a way forward. In education, it was tradition, and tradition remained in the classroom until COVID came along and said, hell no, you need
Yeah.
to move. And that's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, something you said which I find interesting. Thank you for that. You've said that you did not see your students online. So are you saying to me that the cameras were not on?
That's right.
Interesting.
That's right.
Okay.
Because as I said, it was a safeguarding issue. It was part of because you don't have those. Again, you don't have those boundaries online as you would say in a physical world. So therefore, we had to almost add another layer of safeguarding. And by doing that, part of that was about we weren't able to see each other. And I think you'll find that across the board. Not everybody, not every school, not every environment, but I think a lot of people were not able to do that. Some of it was, for example, so there are some platforms where you can create your own background, but you have to have the right software to be able to do that. So your operating system has to be up to scratch, and if you didn't, then you couldn't. So if you weren't able to and you wanted to have a different background, you might have been unable to do so, and that presented challenges in terms of people being able to see into people's personal spaces. And the same went for me as a teacher as well. You know, I'm inviting the world into my personal space, and there are challenges around that. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
I think going on into the future, maybe what you could do is people who want to be taught online, or children and families that want to be taught online, you might sign some agreement that says that, you know, it's okay for us to have that two-way communication. Certainly that's what I would like to see. And I think certainly when you get to, say, older pupils like Key Stage 5, I don't see that as a challenge or a hindrance. I think that you should be able to do that. Yeah.
Whoa, thank you. It's interesting because most of the educators I have spoken to, they actually had the choice of, seeing the students on the platform. And the students were making a decision, all of them, not all of them, to put their cameras on. Some of them decided that they didn't want to reveal, the spaces, etc. But some of them actually, some educators insisting that they need to know who was behind the screen. So it was interesting in terms of safeguarding issue, how it actually panned out, because some educators saying that due to safeguarding issue, they need to see who they were speaking to, in terms of, is it this child that the name is on? Is that Peter that is actually I'm speaking with?
Yeah, I see that.
Or is it someone
And
else?
certainly I think that obviously there's going to be a lot of review and reflection and evaluation on the delivery by every school that will have to deliver their learning online, and they will make a decision going forward about that. I definitely would opt for being able to see each other. It's clearly so important.
Yeah, it is. I just cannot imagine, because I had some students who, decided that they didn't have the camera on, but I actually wanted to see them. And I say, okay, you could switch off your camera. And even that felt alien to me because it was just a square box. So in terms of engagement, it is even more challenging when you're not able to see, because you're not able to see. It's hard enough not being able to see them and not being able to see the reaction, the body language, the nodding, do they understand, or the dozing off, etc. But when they actually have the camera off, you don't even know what's going on behind there.
Well, they could just be, you don't know what they're doing. You don't know if they're on their phone, you don't know if they're on the PlayStation, you don't know. But yeah, like I said, lots of reflection should be going on right now with schools and how we go forward with this, because we're in the UK, I'm in the UK, we are probably set for another lockdown. Yes. We're set for another spike. So what will online learning look like exactly. Then? So we have to prepare for that if and when it comes, if and when there is another spike and we are back into lockdown. How are we going to progress with this online learning and the delivery?
Yeah, because I'm just, visualizing that, because today I was on an online platform. I was in a meeting today. And normally I have my camera on and I have my audio, my audio on. But I was doing something today in the kitchen. I was cooking. So I had my camera off. And it felt so odd because this is the first time I've actually had my camera off. And I was busy doing what I'm doing. And it's like half of the time they say, Debbie, are you there? And I have to run back to because as he keeps saying, I'm not even too sure if you're there. And it is so true, but I had to apologize because, I had to be doing something because I had another meeting to go on. So I just needed to do that. And I just find, just visualizing and just thinking about it, how really odd that would have felt, not being able to see my student, not being able to see what the reactions are. Because when you say something, okay, it is hard enough not being able to be close to them in the physical classroom, but not actually being able to see the body language, the facial expression, to see whether or not they're looking down as I'm teaching. If they're looking down, okay, there's a phone in progress. It's like all of that. So how did you check the learning have taken place?
Of course, we have to set homework, and that's what I would do, but also you make use of the chat room. You ask questions and everybody has to answer a question. This works okay if you have a small group, but if you have a larger group, that presents its own problem. And what that would then mean is that you should be team teaching. Maybe someone is managing the chat room whilst you're doing the delivery.
Yeah, exactly.
And very often, a lot of us we're one-man band, so there is maybe only one person in a department. So how then do you team teach? So there's all of that to consider going forward in terms of how you make the delivery. But that's what I did. I had to make use of the chat room and ensure that when asking questions, I got a response from everybody.
Wow, that is so much more challenging, isn't it? Whereas it's when you actually come off teaching, you would have been exhausted. Because
you are because you are not just delivering lessons. You now know that students are not doing any exams, so you have to do all that planning and prepping and marking on another level. So to ensure that there are going to be I think there are going to be a lot of people challenging a lot of results. So you need to make sure that all your the work that you've done in preparation for that is up to scratch. So there's all of that. Then of course you're planning for the next academic year, and then it's not just the ordinary planning. Now you're planning through social distancing. Now you're planning to deliver where you can't do group work. So for example, you might be able to work in pairs.
Mm.
You know, and it depends on how your school, how many of your children come back all at one time.
Mm.
So if you are in bubbles, you might be able to do some group work. But if you're not, what does that mean?
Mm.
There are some subjects that are going to have their own particular problems. So where you have subjects that use a lot of different tools, so for example, say music or art, or my subject area, media, we use a lot of different equipment. All that equipment will need to be cleaned before the next group of students or so on. So you have to package in time to get it cleaned, either by yourself or the students themselves. So it's a lot, and it's been somewhat disheartening to hear, certainly in the media, this disparagement of teachers, that somehow we've been on holiday all this time, or we've had a break all this time,
Exactly.
you know, because we've not been furloughed, we're getting paid as normal, we're just doing nothing.
Yeah.
So I don't have conversations with civilians about my work.
I totally agree with you there, because I no longer do that. I switch off, because we've always had the thing, oh yes, you are so lucky, you're on long, you have long holidays. But I keep repeating in every episode of this, as an educator, our mind is always thinking. You go to the supermarket, you see something, and thinking, oh, this would be useful for my class, because in last lesson, I'm not too sure how we actually do that. We need to fix that up a bit. So your mind is always thinking. So once an educator, we are
Always.
exactly.
Always an educator.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing about it. No one seems to see that side. All they see is the 6 or 8 weeks holiday and the half term and the Easter break. But we really don't even get those breaks, because we still have to be planning. We still have to be marking what haven't been marked.
Yeah.
And it's all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't talk to civilians about the work I do.
I think that's a very good philosophy, because there is no point. But you see, the interesting thing about all of this as well, come COVID, a lot of people are now beginning to realize what educators have been doing. However, the respect is only temporary, because come September, they forget that they were praising us how good we were and how good we are. Come September, they're going to be saying, oh yes, well, who these teachers think they are, right? So it's temporary. The mind is temporary, because
so let me ask you a question then. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a situation where it's the lack of respect for educators. That's one. And secondly,
why does society disrespect educators?
Right. The reason for that is because everybody seems to be of the perception that they could all be teachers. Because when they actually have helped the child to probably tie their shoelaces or to ride a bike, in the head, that is teaching.
Well, on some levels it is, isn't it?
It is teaching, but is it the teaching that we do? No, it's not. It's more than, you see, we are more than just teachers. We are parents, we are counselors, we are mentors, we are coaches, we are first aiders. We are all of those things, especially if you're teaching primary school children. And if you're teaching 15 to 16-year-old, you become the counselor, you become the relationship guidance, you become the relationship communication with the parents, because they're not getting on with the parents. We become all of that. But with the parents, they're only one thing. That's the difference. With educators, we wear so many different hats. Whereas as a parent, you wear the parent hat, you might wear the first aider hat sometimes, you don't even wear the counseling hat because it is not expected of you. But as educators, it is expected that we should be able to solve the 16-year-old who say that they got pregnant, they don't know what to do because they cannot tell the parents and they want to get the money after pill. What do you think, miss? You see, so those are the different hats we wear. Because as parents, we don't wear all those hats. Because the other thing is, it become an expectation regarding educators. It is expected that we ought to fulfill all those roles and effectively.
A lot of the reasons for that is because the agencies service that used to service those things, like the counselling, like the, as for example, PSHE, like social services, those services have been decimated. And so the expectation that the labour of those services has now been added to teachers. And so that's part of the reason, I think, why we have had to bear those things, and why there are so many different levels of all kinds of things that the expectation is that we do. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it is. And yes, there have been a reduction in the services in the input of social services and counseling, etc. However, I do feel even though there have been the reduction, there have never been enough of those things. So we've always had to fulfill those roles. We've always had to fulfill those roles. And I feel now we're fulfilling those roles even more so, because these services, in some cases, have been completely removed. We've always had to, because when I think back in terms of when I started teaching, I've been teaching now for over 25 years. And I've seen that the role I begin to perform is much more than when I first started. When I first started, you were still doing the counseling because there have never been enough counselors, etc. But the amount of students you are now becoming counselor to is much more.
Yeah, that's right, because class sizes are ridiculous.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we're actually thinking about class sizes, some of our class sizes are 30, 35. When I've actually been talking to some educators, some of them have 50 and 45 in the classes. And I'm thinking, oops, oops. Exactly. So that's another aspect as well.
Yeah.
When you actually taught online, how many students you have in your class, and how many students actually showed up?
Well, the normal numbers. So the numbers that I have in my classroom would be the numbers that I expect online. One class was quite small, so that was more manageable. But the other few classes were the similar sorts of numbers. There is, and I think you'll find this across the board also, there was a percentage of students who just didn't attend. And they weren't online. And certainly where I am, there was a contingency to communicate with those families about the engagement of those students, because it's quite important that even in these strange circumstances that they have a continued, consistent engagement with the school. So there was that going on, but similar sorts of numbers, especially if you're looking at maths and English and science, there's 30, 40 children all at one time. And I don't think wider society, or certainly parents and families, understand the numbers. They don't get the numbers.
Of course not.
Yeah.
No, they don't. It's only now that in terms of COVID, a lot of them are saying, oh my goodness, I now understand why you guys used to, you guys are going through. Really? Do you really understand? Or because you're in this crisis situation, you are saying you understand because you're pushed in a corner. Come September, you don't understand at all.
Yeah.
So that's the reality of the whole thing. Another thing is, how many students did you have in terms when you actually were in the physical classroom? Was it a mixture of students that you had in one group, or you had, was it like I'm going to say this, was it like a babysitting setup where, you just...
Okay, so what you will find, certainly across the board, once again, is that you would get a mixed year group. So you would still keep the key stages together. So you'd have key stage 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, not 5, but certainly 3 and 4. 2, yeah. you would have those ones. So anything from year 7 up to year 10 and 11. You would keep those groups together, but you might have, say in Key Stage 4, you might get 15-year-olds, 14, 15-year-olds up to 16-year-olds in that group. But certainly for me, it was kept in those key stages. So it was. But the content, because of that, the content of those sessions weren't a regular school day. So they weren't necessarily having the subjects that they were doing, and certainly not at the same kinds of time. So, and going back to my teaching online, I thought that it was right that not to deliver the same lesson. So there was no way that I was going to deliver a lesson for an hour and a half online. So I took an executive decision and I shut down my lessons a little bit sooner. But for key stage, key worker children, when we were on site, it's usually a whole day. It's not quite so much babysitting. Sometimes it was some days, but it depends. It wasn't until so we went into lockdown about the 23rd, 24th of March. By mid-April, or sooner than that, we had a routine and we had a bank of lessons and planning where anybody who went in could extract from that to deliver to the groups of children that you had. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So what did the day look like? Because I had a friend, one of my friends, her son was going into schools because the school said that they were supporting children who they felt was either behind and needed extra support. So he was going in 3 days a week, and he was going in from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock for the 3 days a week. And then they increased it to 5 days a week, but it's the same time from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock.
Okay.
Was it
so my experience, it was Monday to Friday, and it was 8:45, 9 through to 3:10. It was a full school day.
Wow, okay. So what did you guys do in terms of lunch? The student bring in their lunch? What happened?
No, we provided lunch. Obviously it was scaled back because there weren't as many people on site. Lunch is going to be very, very interesting come September, because during lockdown and when we were on site, we were able to space the children out across the dining room. But if you've got, a couple of hundred people in the canteen, how do you space those people out in observing lockdown? So it's going to be an interesting session of planning and blocking which groups are going to lunch and which groups are not. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting come September.
Thank you. So what time was your online lessons? From what time to what time did you do it?
I had primarily morning ones. So most of mine were in the mornings, which is good, because then I had the rest of the day that I could, I guess it doesn't matter really. You could, whichever part of the day you'll be planning. But for me, it felt okay to do it in the morning, because I could just get it out of the way and then get on with the rest of my day and then plan for the next morning.
Okay. So you were planning your lessons on a daily basis?
No, weekly. I would be planning like a week in advance.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing is, all the students who, yes, we know that some students did not turn up because for whatever reason. And when they didn't turn up, the principal or the head of department actually communicated with them. Did they actually turn up after that, or you just lost them? What was the situation there?
I would say about a good percentage returned. So that continued communication with them and their families was important. because it had an impact and they returned. But there was a percentage of people who just didn't attend. Now, like you said, that could be for whatever reason, but I do think that the pandemic has revealed so much, and part of what it has revealed is the disparity between people who are clued up to work outside of lessons in school and have the right equipment to do so, and those who don't. So I think it was quite a revelation to a lot of us, say that there were quite a few homes that didn't have a laptop, or there was just the one laptop or the one computer between a whole family, or that maybe there was just families that were only using their mobile phones, and maybe the mobile phones were on contracts or pay as you go or whatever, so that they didn't have enough data, or the equipment that they did have was so old the software wasn't able to keep up with the software that we were delivering our lessons on. So it was quite a revelation. The government has said that it was or is going to deliver a package where disadvantaged pupils and families would get access to these things, but I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that rolled out yet. I haven't seen, or have I been in communication with people who have said, yes, I've got my new equipment and it's working very well. So it really is, it's such a revelation, and at best, the education system is doing a disservice to these people and these families, because we're not going back to that oldish way of learning and teaching and working and careers. You know, there's a good percentages of us now where the careers that we thought we had is just not going to exist anymore. So how are we preparing them for this kind of thing? For example, you know, look at travel and tourism. Why would you teach travel and tourism in the way that you did 3 months ago, let alone in the future? Because it's all changed now. So it's imperative that families and children who are learning now have access to computers on a basic level so they can access the right software just for their learning. And of course that they have an internet service provider and an internet connection that can be afforded by that family so that they can have access to it. And so, you know, this experience has really just opened up this can of worms where we realize that there are a lot of people who didn't have access to the basics.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. It is so very true. And I think, as you say, it was a revolution for us, because it's an assumption that students had access to.
It was.
Exactly. And it became a situation where you realize that there's one laptop and they have 4 children going to going schools.
4 children. You maybe you've got someone just starting school, so they're year 7, so they're like 11 or 12, and they've got their own homework to do. And there's someone maybe who's in years 10 and 11, 15, so they're 15, 16 doing GCSEs, and then you've got maybe another family member who's doing A-levels, and there's just one device between all of them. I don't know how you manage that. I don't know how you manage
that. So as a result of that, you know, as educators, we had to be flexible, because when you actually give the assignment and the students say, well, miss, I couldn't hand in the assignment because, you know, it's only one laptop, etc. All you say is, okay.
But exactly, but also it then explains why, even before lockdown, why there were children who couldn't do the homework, and you realize that actually these are some of the reasons why. And although we kind of knew it was on a back burner somehow, and we didn't quite comprehend it, but now lockdown, and now this is the way we are learning, this is the only way we're delivering our lessons primarily. It just threw it wide open, and it was quite disheartening to see.
Really. It was, especially when they're reminding you, well, miss, I couldn't do it because there's only one laptop, you know, my phone, I cannot connect things on my phone. I don't have enough data. I have pay as you go. It's really a wide
Yeah.
open, as you
So,
said, you know.
so
Sorry, go
then
ahead.
what that means then for us as teachers or educators, it then means that you have to redo your lesson.
Yeah.
You have to redo your delivery.
Yes.
And you have to redo and look at your timelines and time scales
Yeah.
again, just to accommodate that
Yeah.
within the group as a whole. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We had no choice. As I keep saying that this platform forced us to differentiate a lot more than we were doing in the classroom. Because in
Yeah,
the classroom, we differentiate, we say, okay, we give the stretch section, da, 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 da. We were not really differentiating. When we actually came onto this platform, this student was making decision in differentiation because some of them were deciding that, okay, I am not coming onto this platform at this time. I am not turning on my camera. They were making decisions and they decide, well, this is how I am going to do the work because I cannot do it this way. So they were actually forcing us to reflect. They actually forced me quite a lot to reflect. And if I wanted my students, I also needed to be flexible in terms of what time I'm going to connect with them. Because my connection in the morning, no, I had to make sure that my connection was all day because I need to see this student I haven't seen last week. And if it means that
yeah,
me actually staying on the platform until 4 o'clock or 3:30, I would have to do that
mm,
because I need to know what's happening to you because I didn't see you last week.
sure.
I haven't seen you all of last week. And you're saying to me, oh, Miss, I'm coming on. So therefore, I have to sit here because I need to see what's going on with you. I need to see in terms of your well-being, what's going on with the emotional factor, your psychological factor. So I have no choice. So they were actually forcing us to differentiate whether or not we want to or not. So it was no longer one size fit all. It was individual students.
Yeah, and also I think even before lockdown and before COVID, it also revealed the way in which some families approach learning outside of the classroom. We know that the best students, the students that perform well, are the ones who engage in learning outside the classrooms.
Yeah.
And there was a significant percentage of people that you could just see it who just didn't do that. Now, there is definitely something going on. And I think this is what parents realize, that actually you have to have a pattern, a method, and some kind of organizational familial thing. If you've got children of school age, where you integrate in your family life pockets of time in the day for learning so that they understand and engage outside of the classroom. And this was laid bare during lockdown
Yeah. Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it is very true. And another thing, it actually, became wide open was education was not only in the physical classroom. In terms of maths, as I was saying to some parents, when you're doing maths, get them to be in the kitchen with you. You're
Yeah,
doing, get them to be proactive because education is not only, restricted to the textbook. You need to see
that's right.
education as a wider thing. And education is something that must be enjoyed and it's got to be enjoyable.
No, yeah, I agree with you. So, in terms of maths, you've got them in the kitchen. They could be weighing ingredients.
Yeah,
You could be so that's maths. You could be discussing chemistry and
yeah,
what makes certain ingredients rise in a cake or not. You might be
exactly.
discussing, I don't know, geometry and or
Yeah,
shapes and sphere
yeah,
measurements. So you're looking at which container to put the bread dough in and why,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
lot. And certainly for me in my subject area, where I deliver film and media, it's everywhere. So certainly where I teach, the trend is towards engaging parents. When you look at the performance of students and how well they do, there is a correlation between family and parental involvement. And where you've got
yes,
families parents and other stakeholders involved really engage in that learning of the child, they do so much better, because one of the things that happens is that the child develops a level of respect and confidence. This person cares about me and what I'm doing in school, so I had better. I need to. So it's a further reinforcement of that.
Yeah.
So in my subject area, I would ask parents to, well, why don't you analyze your own social media activity? Why are you on social media and what are you looking at? You know, when you're watching telly, what kinds of programs are you watching and why? When you're out on the street, what kinds of adverts are you seeing at the bus stop as you go by? When you go into the supermarket, what kinds of newspapers and magazines do you see, and what are the headlines? So in my subject area, the familiar learning, the familial learning, the way in which parents can get on board is several fold and very layered and very personal and very interactive. For me, there's no excuse really, but it can be easily rolled out for other subjects. And I'd like to think that parents and families understood this during lockdown, and it's a way of taking the burden of thinking that you have to sit down straight on the desk and do your learning. That's
Exactly.
that's not the only way to do it. And that would
Exactly.
take the burden off parents, you know, in doing this important work.
It is, thank you. It's very, very true, because it actually makes them realize that for teaching, you need to be innovative and you need to be creative.
Yeah.
You know, it's no longer the physical classroom where students sit at desk and teachers chalk and talk. Education is everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And need to be embraced, so that it is in the head that it doesn't only happen, you know, inside of these four walls. It's, you know, everywhere you're looking. That's what we as educators do all the time, because we see education is everywhere. So you're walking down the street and think, oh yes, I like that thing, I'm going to incorporate it in my lesson. So that's what you do. So we hope that students and parents begin to see education outside of the physical classroom, and that they could actually engage with education everywhere, and it could be a success.
Well, I guess it has to be. I would like to think that parents and families now realize that instead of picking on teachers or individual schools, you now need to know and go to your councils, and then from your councils you're going up through maybe your political parties. You know, who are the heads of education, who's the shadow this or that for education, and then going further up the tree, you need to ensure that the government makes good on their delivery. So where are these families? Can we see these families who receive the IT equipment that you promised? What are the results of that? Because again, the COVID has shown that education and careers and the way that we work it started changing before this. It started changing before lockdown and before COVID. What's happening now, it's just sped it along so much faster, so much further. And I think it's important for us to do students a service in showing them that you need to think about other things now. It's inevitable. Because, you know, retail, I think is it John Lewis or somebody just announced again more job cuts. The high street, therefore, and all of the people that service those high streets, they're not going back. Many of them aren't going back to their jobs. Many of those roles aren't going to be there anymore. Again, as I mentioned before, travel and tourism, that is, again, almost totally changed. We've just heard that Spain, you know, if you're coming back from certain regions of Spain, you've got to lock down or isolate for 2 weeks. If you know that about a country, why would you leave to go on holiday anyway? So it's we've got to teach them to adapt to change, and that's the most important thing, really.
Yeah, and also stepping out of the comfort zone.
Yeah, which we all did.
Yes, we had no choice. We had no choice. We were forced. It's either do or die setup. We were forced to run with it. And as educators, because we are always thinking on our feet, and we also very flexible. And in the classroom, you will have your lesson plan, and you realize that this lesson plan have to take a back seat because it's not working anyway. So you have to think on your feet quickly and decide, okay, this is how I'm going to teach this because my plan isn't working, because for whatever reason the students are not tuned on, etc. So you always have to be thinking on your feet. So on the online platform, we had to be even more creative, more innovative, because our lessons from the classroom could not be transported onto the platform. We taught major adaptation.
Sure. I think that I think it was exciting, and a lot of people found, a lot of teachers, I think a lot of educators found this newer way of teaching. I don't think we were reticent in that at all. We embraced it. I think what made it challenging was the reason why, the circumstances why. It was a viral pandemic. Many of us have gone through a lot of personal loss. Many of us are anxious about. Many of us were on the people who had to shield. Many of us were in those groups. So I think that a lot of it is about the circumstances in which we had to learn and adapt and make good. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's very true. We had no choice than to adapt, because we realized that the physical classroom information wasn't coming onto the visual platform. Even though we want to take it, it wasn't working.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, what I think what I was trying to say is that we had to, as well as adapt, we had to manage our own personal emotions around being in a pandemic.
Yeah, it is very true.
So
Yeah.
on top of the added burden of our teaching and learning, we had to manage ourselves emotionally, mentally, psychically. We're in a pandemic. Many people have died, are dying, will die. You know, I think that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, thank you, because we are human first. Because people tend to forget that teachers are just ordinary people,
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's often forgotten because they see that what we are supposed to be doing and not what we are. Human beings who, as you rightly say, who also have anxiety, who also have stress, who feel frustrated as well. We've got all of that too, but it's often forgotten.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people tap into this vocational thing and think that, well, you and use it as a reason not to reward teachers and the sector in the way that it should be. Well, you're doing it for the love of your students, aren't you? You're doing it for the love of your subject, aren't you? This is what you got yourself into, wasn't it? This is what you expected, wasn't it? Why can't you just get on with it for peanuts? But I think that it's increasingly, particularly if you live in a city, particularly, I live in London, it's an expensive place to be. The love of my students is not going to pay my mortgage. It's not going to put petrol in my car to take me to my place of work. So these are the realities of our, as you said, being ordinary, being human. And as I said, it's one of the things that civilians tap into when they want to disagree or with the educators and teachers.
That's very, very true. Thank you. Connecting with that is the caring role.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is so very true. For the love of your students, you're supposed to be caring. Why are you thinking about yourself first? Hello.
And therefore you should sacrifice yourself for them. But it doesn't work like that.
Of course not. Of course not, because if you don't take care of yourself, as I keep on hammering on to educators, if you do not take care of yourself, you cannot take care of your student. And self-care is not selfish. Lack of self-care is selfish. Because when you're not taking care of yourself and you become ill, the education department or your school have to find someone to replace you. So
And they'll do that in a heartbeat.
exactly. Exactly. So were you taking care of yourself, that would not have happened. So forget about it in terms of self-care is selfish. Hell no, it is not selfish at all. When you are not taking care of yourself, that is selfishness because
Sure.
you're not looking after yourself. You're not safeguarding yourself. You're not protecting yourself. That is selfishness because it means that when you go ill, so many people are affected. Whereas when you take care of yourself, you are so enriched and you're so filled up that you could look after everybody else.
Sure.
There isn't an issue. That is something I'm, trying to program into educators' heads. Self-care, self-care, self-care. It is the most important aspect. And that is the thing we must always do. First, second, and last.
Sure.
Self-care. Because you cannot pour from an empty jug. And if you're tired, you become frustrated. When you're shouting at your student, not because you want to shout at your student, but because you're tired and
Yeah.
you're burnt out because you were not
Yeah.
taking care of yourself. You haven't slept. You're spending all this time doing this marking, spending all this time doing this planning. Hell no. I have a policy of I do not take work home. I
Yeah.
used to before when I first started, I didn't have a dining table. The children were complaining because all they were seeing was books, 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 marking this marking pile, this marking pile. No, I'm doing it in work. If I'm not able to finish it, sorry, you get sorted tomorrow. And we need to
Yeah.
start remembering that.
Yeah. I agree.
It's so important. Okay,
Okay.
overall, what 3 tips would you give educators in relationship to, because there are lots of stuff here, to the physical classroom during the pandemic? Because you actually had a dry run. You actually had a dry run before me that's going back in September, because you know what it looks like because you've been in the physical classroom. So you know what that, you know what that looks like, and the online platform. So what 3 tips would you give educators?
Oh wow! Certainly, when you go back into the physical environment, one of the things you're going to have to do or be prepared for is to drill it into your students the methodology for social distancing and keeping clean, washing hands. So that's one thing. I think you've got to be prepared for that. In terms of online, it's going to be very important that you have meetings where you bounce ideas off your colleagues about the best delivery for your subject area. And that's not necessarily within your own team. I think that it's always good maybe to look at adjacent departments to see how they do it and get best practice. So if I'm in film and media, maybe I should, and I do, let's have a look at how English delivered theirs, or let's have a look at how maths delivered there. So I would thoroughly recommend that. The third thing that I would say is make the most of CPD that includes IT.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
Very, very important. Something that crossed my mind when you were talking about the wash hands. What did you guys do when students had to go to the toilet and wash their hands? Did they have extra toilets?
No, and again, that is going to be very interesting when come September and most, if not all, students are back. That's going to be very interesting. So during lockdown, children would go to the toilets and use them as normal. There was plenty of washing facilities and drying facilities. And then even when they came back into the classroom, there's still that system of using the hand sanitizer and then going back to their own space. What that is going to look like come September, you know, the use of loos is going to be challenging, to say the least, I'd say, because we haven't got any more toilets. We've got the same number of toilets.
Okay.
What?
Okay. So in your school, because I know some school had washing facilities, extra washing facilities outside of the toilet, etc. Your school didn't have that.
Not extra facilities. It did have like sanitization stations, so there would be tables with additional hand sanitizer on the tables. Certainly, as staff members coming in and out of the staff only doorways, there were hand sanitizers there, but there weren't any additional toilets. No. Certainly, it's definitely an additional financial burden on schools, because if you can imagine, you know, the kind of cleaning materials that they're now going to need is going to be an additional finance that they're going to have to think about. So I'd like to think that that is going to come from the government somehow, somewhere. You know, Mr. Sunak has to deliver.
Yeah. Thank you. It is very, very true, because there's so many things that extra that is now needed, because in every classroom, you know, there's a bottle of sanitizer, you know, so all of that.
Sure.
Those
But also
extra.
time. Also, time is going to be needed. I would like to see. I don't know how it's going to happen. It would be nice to see additional time allocated within lessons to do a changeover, so that stations can be cleaned in between, let alone those subjects that uses a lot of tools. You know, you need that time to clean down your equipment. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, it would be interesting times ahead when we come into September. There's some of my educators were starting on the first Monday in August. Some of them are starting next week, and it's like, what would it look like? What would it look like? You know, there's so many issues in terms of what the whole situation would look like for us and for the students. Because now when you were in the physical classroom, you had a percentage of the children. Now, you know, is it going to be half of the class in the morning, half of the class this week? You know, it's the logistic. It's just a lot of things need to be discussed.
I mean, I'd like to think that senior leaders will tell their staff in very good time. But of course, they are only working on what they get from the Department of Education as and when they get it. You know, the information that we're getting just before lockdown was crazy, and they had to implement and interpret those guidelines within days, within hours, often.
Exactly.
So I think the other thing that I would say to people is try not to stress out too much about it. We can only work with what we've got, and anything more than that, anything over and above that, just let it go, because you'll just work yourself into a stressful situation, and it's already stressful.
Yeah, that is very true. That is very, very true. Thank you very much. Have you got anything else to say before I wrap up?
I don't, Debbie. Thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed our little conversation, and I wish you well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I would like you to like, share, and comment. And thank you, everybody, for coming on board. I'll see you guys tomorrow with another educator. There was meant to be one more educator with us. However, she was having challenges trying to come online. Those were the things that, as educators, we were facing every day, trying to come online. There's sometimes we couldn't come online. We just have to say to our students, sorry, can't connect. I'll see you guys later on or tomorrow. This is exactly what's happening. Trying to come on with the challenges of the internet and the online platform. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic evening, night, morning, wherever you are. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Stay safe. Be blessed.